And so what's interesting is that Dan Siegel has found in the work that he's done looking at a lot of the literature that mindfulness practices lead to about, I think, 8 different traits arising. And I think this is interesting because when I think about lawyers and the life and the work of a lawyer, they seem to be awfully desirable and important traits. So for example, there's attuned communication, the ability to really connect with somebody that you're interacting with. And of course, if you're a lawyer, if it's your client, if it's the jury, if it's the judge, if it's a partner, clearly an important trait. Body regulation, that fight and flight response, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system at play, and being able to have it where you don't flee just because you feel a little overwhelmed, or you're not frozen as well. Emotional balance, these highs and lows that we can go through of mood and affect, to be able to have more of an ability to sort of regulate and modulate that during the day. Empathy, the ability to really connect with and understand the mind of another person so that when you're making these decisions about what to present or how to articulate it, you actually have a sense of what's going on in the other person's mind to be more effective at it, as well as to develop a nicer relationship, which of course in turn feels better as a person. Fear modulation, the idea that when the limbic system begins to get overactive, when there's emotional flooding going on, maybe because of some reminder to some earlier event or just something that's really bothering the person in the moment because of the way somebody has said something, the ability for the cortex to be able to send out a chemical called GABA to tone down this reactivity of the limbic system. And in Jurapsych, we talk about this idea that there's different circuitry in the brain that isn't always so integrated. We call that a split in the circuits, right? So how can we integrate this split in the circuits, resolve this split in the circuits? There's also insight into what's going on in your own mind. There's intuition, what we talked about a little earlier, the ability to really get a sense of that bodily reactivity or bodily sense of what's going on. And then response reflexivity, response flexibility, the ability to, when you're in a situation and something's going on because of what the opposing counsel said that's really sort of bothering you, to be able to pause, to be able to take that moment, to be able to then gather thoughts based on some of the other traits or features we just talked about. So this collection and morality, this collection is also been found to be present in children who've had the really ideal childhoods in so many ways, so that in a secure relationship, a lot of these traits tend to reveal themselves. And then, of course, we've all had the lives that we've had, and we all find ourselves where we find ourselves. What's wonderful is that mindfulness practices are found to, in this moment, enhance those very skills going forward. So as we engage in mindfulness practices, we bring about our capacity to do each of those things, perhaps, more naturally, right? Without having to try, because a part of our brain that really seems to be associated with those very aspects of what we can bring to bear in the moment are in fact changing as a result of mindfulness meditation and other meditative practices. Now, what happens is, in the work that I do with attorneys and law students, is we find ourselves caught in the middle of the day when that phone call or that fax comes in or the email or whatever our trigger points are, whatever it is that throws us off. Either it can make us overly something or we can retreat. That's part of that sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system at play. Mindfulness first is about realizing, waking up and saying, I'm caught. I'm about to go down that slippery slope, another Jurapsych term, I'm about to go down that slippery slope, right, of reactivity that I've done again and again and again, and that simply has never been really fulfilling, and yet I keep doing it. Might I do something different? And armed with the knowledge of neuroscience, that if you choose to do something different, and you do something different, it won't just have a one-time benefit, but it will actually begin to set in motion a new set of neural pathways so that the next time you're more likely to do what it is that you've begun to do, this more optimal way of dealing with the situation, and less likely, because of the attenuating and the atrophying of these old synaptic connections, that can really inspire somebody to say, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to see what happens, because this can change the rest of my life. And then, of course, and I'm interested in the lives of everybody around me, opposing counsel, friend, family member, we're all in this together. So What do you do though when you catch yourself? And oftentimes it can be as simple as, well, just bring awareness to your breathing. Just stop and, bring awareness to your breathing. And that's enough, without question. All of the exercises that are taught as part of Jurasight involve the hands. And so they're called the learned hand techniques, or the learned hand exercises. Because of course all lawyers, or most law students and lawyers, remember learned hand from their days in law school because he is one of America's great jurists. He was clear of mind. So we say, okay, these learned hand techniques. That's a way of remembering that. Also, because so much of the work of a contemplative practice is really uniting the whole of who we are, having this whole body integrity, listening more to the body, being more connected to the body, not being so caught up here in the chatter, which can be very effective as a lawyer, but we can be even more effective if we can redistribute it in a more natural way. They become the learned hand that wakes us up. They're really learned in the sense that our body begins to say, hello, wake up, you're caught in something. So one of the learned hand techniques, one of the foundation techniques, is called 4-7-8 hands. 4-7-8 hands is based on a very ancient breathing technique that involves the breathing count of 4, 7, and 8, which I'll explain in a moment, and is now being used by Andrew Weil, a wonderful physician, and others as a anti-panic, anti-anxiety breathing exercise. It's always served that purpose, and now more research is looking into its actual effectiveness in this regard. So we take the 4-7-8 breathing technique, but we combine it with the hands, the learned hands. So the exercise is to inhale to the count of 4, hold to the count of 7, and then exhale to the count of 8. And what we do is we'll do that 2 times, but we do it with the hands, so that while we're inhaling to the count of 4, we're opening the hands to the count of 4. While we're inhaling to the count of 7, where we're holding our breath to the count of 7, we are keeping our fingers outstretched and feeling that stretch to the count of 7. And then as we exhale to the count of 8, we close our fingers to the count of 8 so that we can then do it again. So it looks like this. Now what's nice is that can be done for no reason. You wake up in the morning, it can be just a grounding exercise. You get to work, you're sitting down, sort of like pushing the reset button. In mindful parenting, I did this because we have it where you draw like a little button on your head, and it's like your kids can come up and say, reset, reset, because they can tell when we've lost it. So it's like pushing that reset button when you get to work, because the drive to work, whatever it is, you're already thinking about all this stuff. You're not going to forget the important stuff. Why don't we take a moment and take a breath? And so this could be a way you sit down, part of the practice, just a 15-second part of the practice, but it sort of grounds us for the day as it progresses. And so it's helpful in that regard. And that's also a nice way of practicing it, keeping it so reinforced that it's truly second nature. Then, when that phone call comes, when some situation arises that we're not feeling good about, that we begin to find an agitation arising, we go, okay, I caught myself, terrific. Now, what am I going to do? Am I going to go through the same? Am I going to jump right back into the old pattern? Or am I going to do something a little different? Well, we are kind to ourselves. We let what happens, happens. But if we can say, okay, I'm going to do just twice, with awareness, and that's the key, to really be aware of what we're doing. We know that in those moments, the brain becomes more integrated. It loses its conditioned reactivity. It moves into a more integrated state. It begins perhaps a process of synaptogenesis, or change in the synaptic connections. In that moment, begins to lay a new or different neural pathway. And then you pick up with whatever it is that you're going to do. Now on the phone, that can be done literally while you say one moment. And the 8 seconds that goes on in our mind that sometimes we think is just an enormous eternity, for the other person really isn't. And pauses, of course, can be very, very helpful. So many, many people find this to be a very effective way of just taking a few moments to ground themselves at different parts of the day, when they just sort of remember that let me ground myself, let me sort of create a greater stability, let my focus and clarity of mind sort of move into a state of greater presence. And then, of course, when you need to, in the next moment, respond, let's respond to the real needs of that moment, not react by getting so caught up in it. And this, or any of a variety of practices that can bring us into center, can be very helpful in that regard.